Boldwood presents Fate of Echoes and Embers, written by C.L. Mecca and read by Kate Handford and Max Dowler. Chapter 1. Marek. Valewood Bay, Estmere, Elydor. She lives less than a full day's ride from here. I stopped, waiting for the serving girl to clear our meal. She'd not taken her eyes from me last eve when we arrived, or this morn, but I wasn't interested in a dalliance. Not today, at least. "How long will it take to secure your lady's acquiescence?" Cale asked, leaning back into the wooden seat and stretching out his legs. His partner, Mev, watched him with a look that I knew well, one of desire. I'd been introduced to the Giorian prince and Aetherian princess only a fortnight ago, but could appreciate their tight bond, even if partnering wasn't in the cards for me. "Attempt to secure it," I clarified. "There is every likelihood she won't come with us." Mev took a sip of ale. No one at the Maiden's Rest seemed to notice anything unusual about her. By outside appearances, she was an Aetherian woman, Princess Mevlida's long pearl-white hair overshadowing that she was also half-human. If patrons knew the long-lost daughter to King Galfried sat in the same tavern as them, we would be surrounded. As it was, the few that remained this early in the morning were more interested in their own ales than us. "That's not the first time you've said as much. What's the deal?" Mev, the only human to have come through the gate from the human realm in nearly 30 years, often used words not familiar here. "The deal?" I asked. The corners of Cale's mouth lifted. "The scoop, the dealio," he said in his best Mev impression. "Pretty sure he won't know those either. Besides, I've never used the dealio before." Cale's brow raised. "No? Then would you care to tell me where I learned it?" "Oh, I don't know, maybe from one of the other humans in Elydor. We're an entire kingdom of them." She waved her hands around. "If you hadn't noticed." "I don't associate with any other humans, as you know." "Not true. You associate with Issa." My hand froze. I put down the mug of ale and asked Mev to repeat herself. "Did you say Issa?" "It's short for Isolde. She's literally one of the only humans besides me Cale likes. Actually, when I first met her—" "Lady Isolde Hawthorne?" I asked. Cale answered. "You know her?" Oh, I knew her well enough. "I'm certain I mentioned going to Hawthorne Manor when we arrived in Valewood Bay. You made no mention of being familiar with it." Cale sat up in his chair. "I'm sure you didn't." "I'm pretty sure," Mev cut in. "Your exact words were, 'After we drop off Rowan, I need 3 days in Valewood. There's a woman there who might be useful for this mission.'" "And when we asked," Cale added, his gruff Giorian manner more on display now than it had been before Issa's name had been mentioned, "you refused to say any more." That was entirely possible. I didn't talk about Issa. Ever. To anyone. "How do you know her?" I asked, half afraid of the answer. "I would ask you the same." It was a story I had no intention of sharing. Guys, can we put the measuring tape away?" Both Cale and I looked at Mev, neither of us having an idea of what that meant. "Oh, never mind. It would take too long to explain. Cale is friends with her, but I have a feeling she was more than a friend to you." Fucking humans. "A feeling? Because you're reading me?" No human could enter the Aetherian gate without some type of intuitive ability. Typically, once they came through, those abilities were heightened due to the magical qualities of our realm. Mev, the daughter of a king, had apparently become quite powerful in her short time here, and could sense both emotion and intent in others. "I'm not reading you, Marek," she said calmly. "But women's intuition is real. Cale and I exchanged a glance. He shrugged. Issa is the woman I intend to ask for help, I said. You're going to Hawthorne Manor? Mev asked. I am. Cale cleared his throat. Correction. We're going to Hawthorne Manor. Issa is a good friend, as Mev said. From what I knew of Cale, that was surprising, to say the least. Giorians and humans were very rarely friends, especially when the Giorian in question was the son of the king who hated humans with a vengeance. It's a long story, Mev said, which it seems like we'll be able to tell you on the road. I can't believe Cale's Issa is the woman you're asking for help. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, of course. She senses magical qualities. Cale. He was looking at her with amusement. Mev pretended to scowl at him. You figured it out already. More than that, he said dryly. I thought of asking her as well, especially when Marek said we were porting here. Why didn't you? She asked. I was still reeling from the fact that Cale was a friend of Issa's. Because she won't do it. I tended to agree, but remained silent. Even if we tell her the situation? Mev argued. If she can sense the wind crystal. She lowered her voice. Which I assume is something she's capable of doing since it's apparently the strongest of all magical artifacts. It would be nice if Marek can verify it really is in the Maelstrom depths, before risking his neck to retrieve it. Precisely my thinking, I said, leaving it at that. Assuming risking my neck meant risking my life, it was actually much worse than that. Surviving the Maelstrom depths would be nearly impossible. It would be helpful to know the crystal was there for certain. I turned my attention to Cale. You don't believe she'll do it? Even if finding the wind crystal is the only way to reopen the gate? Popping his last piece of bread into his mouth, Cale sighed heavily. She'll not want to leave Hawthorne Manor. The border has become more unstable since Mev's return. Her people are everything to Issa. Keeping them safe is more important to her than anything, including the gate. I didn't argue his point. Cale was right about Issa's love for her people. But I could think of one thing, even more important to her than that. Either way, I was going to Hawthorne Manor to at least try to convince her to accompany us. You're not going to tell us how you know her? Mev asked. No, I answered. I'm not. Cale waved the serving girl to us. I'll simply ask Issa. Maybe he doesn't want us to know, Cale. Mev countered. While her partner gave the serving girl coin for our meal, I offered Mev a smile. The Aetherian princess was as kind as she was fearless. Unfortunately, the same couldn't be said for Cale. He may be fearless, but kind wasn't the first word that came to mind to describe the Giorian warrior. He might have sworn allegiance to Mev's father, pitting him directly against his own, but the man glowered more often than not. I stood as Cale and Mev did the same. We will need to find you mounts, I said, spotting the very person who might secure them for us. Cale followed my gaze and groaned. What? Mev asked. Rhett Damaris is a known human smuggler, even in Gioria. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised Marek knows him. I'll choose not to take offence to that, I said, making my way to Rhett. He owed me a favour, a big one, and it was time for him to pay up. Too bad, Cale called, since I meant it as that. Thankfully, my back was turned so Cale couldn't see me smiling. He was growing on me, but even so, I would be depositing King Balthor's son in Aetheria before making my way to the Maelstrom depths. The question now was, would I be heading there alone? Or would Lady Isolde be accompanying me? And, more importantly, could I survive another encounter with her? Because the first one had nearly brought me to my knees.
Chapter 2. Issa. Hawthorne Manor, border of Estmir and Gioria. "Fall back!" The order came from my commander, one I trusted with my life, but that didn't mean I always listened to him. As Lady of Hawthorne Manor, the welfare of its people was my responsibility. I would not surrender these animals to our enemy when they were relied on by the farmer who owned them. "Lady Isolde!" Pretending not to hear him, I continued to pursue the reavers, spurring my mount forward. The Giorian raiders were headed for the trees, dangerously close to the border. I knew that was the reason my commander attempted to pull us back. But if they did make it to the border, I was prepared to deal with the consequences. It was the largest herd of sheep they'd stolen yet, and one I refused to allow. Mindful these reavers were Giorian and could manipulate the land and eliminate us easily if they so chose, I relied on my knowledge of the terrain to anticipate their movements. Their most likely path was a choke point, a narrow path by the stream where they could herd the sheep through. "We need a diversion!" I yelled to Warren, who rode beside me. He wasn't thrilled with me, but I could deal with my commander later. As he called for 2 guards to loop around and draw the reavers' attention, the remainder of our party rode into the trees. "We need to block the path at the stream," I yelled. Unfortunately, as the reavers became aware of our advantage, tree roots suddenly snaked across our path. Navigating through them and an innocuous rockfall that proved the reavers meant to intimidate rather than harm us, we stayed the course. Thankfully, the diversion worked. As the reavers hesitated, we seized the opportunity to block the narrow path of the stream. The Giorians, realizing they had lost the advantage and the herd, retreated. Regrettably, I couldn't do the same. Warren wasn't pleased. I rode ahead as he gave a command for the others to herd the sheep back where they belonged. "They could have killed you, easily," he said, catching up to me. "True enough," I admitted. "But they wouldn't risk King Balthor's ire in doing so." I could sense by Warren's expression he didn't agree. Balthor would not mourn the loss of a few humans. I pointed to the routes we circumnavigated. "Those men have little regard for law, or Elydor. Balthor hates us, but he has a deep respect for Terranor. Their god, like all others in Elydor, demanded one thing above all: balance. Creating without taking away was strictly forbidden. Perhaps they will return to right the land they've disturbed." I laughed, earning a smile from my stern commander. "Or perhaps not," he admitted. "Even so, I'd not see you come to harm, and would have been pleased if I remained at the keep," I finished for him. He smartly remained silent, for that was the truth of it. Despite the fact that my father trained me himself like the son he never had, Warren disliked whenever I used that training. It was an argument we'd had so many times, I tired of attempting to dissuade him. Instead, I let him believe what he would about my role as Lady of Hawthorne, and continued to think and act according to the values my parents taught me. And if that got me killed one day, so be it. The ride back was as terse as I expected. While my men returned the stolen sheep to their owner, we passed through the gatehouse and spoke again only when both Warren and I dismounted in the courtyard, outside Hawthorne Manor's great keep, as the steward hurried toward us, blurting, "You have guests." That was not unusual. Hawthorne Manor often entertained guests. Warren immediately joined me. Though we did not always agree, my commander, once my father's commander, was as loyal as they came. "Who?" I asked, handing the stable boy the reins of my mount. Prince Kael and Princess Mevlida. His eyes darted between Warren and me, which made little sense. I adored Kael and was glad to see him. I'd only met Mevlida once, but the spark between the two of them was undeniable. Even so, I was surprised when rumor reached us that they were partnered. Their fathers were bitter enemies. Kael pledging himself to King Galfred had been a shocking development indeed. I removed my riding gloves and took a step toward the keep. I'll be glad to see them both. When my steward cleared his throat, I stopped. He was acting unusually odd. There is another guest? Master Eldrick, the son of a tenant farmer whom my father befriended as a young boy, had been the steward of Hawthorne Manor for as long as my memory served. As loyal as Sir Warren, and sharp-witted as any man or woman I knew, he and his family had served me well, especially after the sickness that spread through Estmere, claiming both of my parents' lives. The look on his face now was typically reserved for the direst of news. Who? I asked. The Thalassarian Navarch. If Edric punctured my leather armor with a broadsword, it would have been less painful. I knew it for a fact since I'd experienced it once in an unfortunate training accident. Marek is here? I asked. With the others? I couldn't even manage their names, or remember my own. If not surrounded by my men, I'd have easily succumbed to the desire to sink into the ground. Instead, I channeled the woman who'd once told me, "You are stronger than the storms that seek to break you." My mother's voice echoed in my mind, steadying the whirlwind of emotions swirling around inside me. He is, my lady. They await you in your solar. Resisting the urge to rearrange the errant strands of hair that had escaped my braid, or worse, hurry to my chamber to change from riding clothes into something more presentable, I thanked him. Telling Edric I had no need of his assistance, I made my way into the keep. Hawthorne Manor could have been called a castle, as it was built for defense, but for some reason that neither my parents nor my grandfather, when he was alive, could explain, it had always been named as a manor house. Such was the way of things in Estmere. Our ancestors who first came through the gate brought their ways with them. Over the course of a few hundred years, some were replaced by more modern human traditions and ideals, but more of Estmere remained the same than it had changed. Elydor was a strange place for humans, its requisite need for balance allowing very little technology to pass through the gate, reminding everyone that this world was made for immortals, and humans were their guests. Some of us, myself included, never quite believed that. If native Elydorians simply accepted we were a part of their world, we would have less cause to worry for our safety from their elemental abilities. Each step I took toward the solar chamber was heavier than the last. Why could I face a band of Gyorian reavers, but the thought of seeing Marek again made me want to lose my last meal? My leather boots crushed the newly replaced and scented rushes beneath my feet. Standing in the corridor, my gaze focused on the light of the wall sconce as it flickered against the weathered stone wall behind it. The last time I saw him, the meeting hadn't gone as planned. My entire journey to Thalassaria, I imagined seeing him again, not knowing if it would even happen. Though I planned a detour at the tavern he frequented whenever in port, there was every possibility he would be out to sea. But instead, Marek was right where he'd once told me he spent much of his time when home. Seated at the moonlit current, ale in hand. Also unsurprising, he was with a woman. A beautiful one, at that. What happened next was not something I could have predicted. I looked down at my hand, remembering the slap as clearly as if it was this morn, and not years ago. The rage that had built up seeing him again was as unexpected as my action. I'd never struck another man or woman in my life outside of training. But the look he'd given me, it had been worse than the flippant smile Marek so often wore. It was one of regret. Anger welled inside me. He had no right to feel regret, when he'd been the one to leave without a word. It had taken the entire journey home for me to calm myself, to wonder how I could have actually been in the same room with him, but not spoken a word to the only man I'd ever loved. What a fool I had been. Not for loving him. Marek was an easy man to fall for. But to hear his stories, laugh at his conquests and bad behavior, and then believe I was different. If Kale and Mevlida were not in that chamber, I'd not be reaching my hand out toward the door. But they were, and the reason all three of them were together had me curious enough to turn the knob, take a deep breath, and step inside.
Chapter 3. Marek. I thought I was prepared to see her for the first time since the moonlit current. I wasn't. Dishevelled, her dark brown hair pulled off her face with strands escaping everywhere. She was dressed for battle and looked as if she'd just come from one. Those piercing hazel eyes were trained directly on me, Issa's expression exactly as I'd imagined it would be. Her lips, fuller than on any woman I'd ever known, parted, as if she would say something to me. Instead, she turned to Kale and Mev. It didn't matter that it had been my fault I'd lost the right to have her look at me the way she did them. This had been a bad idea from the start, but I'd known that all along. "What?" she said as Kale rose and hugged her. "Are you doing here?" Mev did the same. For my part, I remained seated. Issa was more likely to stab me than hug me, more's the pity. "Have you eaten?" she asked them, the wine goblets Master Edric gave us already filled. He was a fine steward and even managed to be cordial to me. Without knowing what Issa had told him, I'd expected a cooler welcome. "We have been fed," Mev said, sitting beside the fire in one of 4 plush chairs that had been arranged before it, the intricately carved wooden table at the centre holding our wine goblets. Even without windows, it was a welcoming space, not unlike the rest of Hawthorne Manor. Issa prided herself on the care she and her staff took to make it a home, despite its size. A fortress nearly as large as any in Estmere, it was one of the first built when King Galfried carved out a portion of his own Aetherian land for the humans. "I'm uncertain," Issa said, sitting back, "if I should ask first if the rumours of the two of you are true, or—" She looked at me. "How you come to travel with him?" "Hello, Isolde," I said, not daring to give her the same sort of smile I once had. Instead, I willed myself to forget how beautiful a woman Issa was, forget how her lips felt against my own, pretend she was simply a human noblewoman whose help we needed. "It is good to see you." "I cannot say the same." "Well," Mev put her wine back onto the table, "I, for one, can't wait to hear what the hell happened between the two of you. Marek told us squat on the way here." She added, "Sorry, he told us nothing." "Squat? That's a new one." Kale murmured. "She's a constant source of surprise," he added for Issa's benefit. "And while I can't account for which rumours you've heard, I can tell you Mev and I are partnered, and I did indeed pledge myself to her father." Issa didn't hide her surprise. "Those are the rumours. Would you care to tell me how that happened? The last time I saw the two of you, Princess Mevlida's name was Mia. She claimed you kidnapped her, and I'm certain, she said to Mev, your hair was not white. Mev's side-eye to Kale confirmed part of that as true. Oh, he kidnapped me all right. Totally rude. Long story short, after we left, I started being able to do strange things, and she tugged on her hair. This. Mev knew when she came through the gate, Kale said, that she was King Galfred's daughter, and smartly hid the fact from me, for as long as she was able, hence Mia. Basically, he fell head over heels for me. An Aetherian noblewoman named Lyra found us and began to train me. The two of them brought me to my father. I've heard of her, from Kale. Issa avoided looking at me, but I couldn't seem to do the same. Was that blood on her tunic? Had she been injured? Prince Kale of Gioria, Issa said, her smile to Kale one of warmth. Falling in love with King Galfred's daughter. Fate has a way of intervening in mysterious ways, although I doubt your father appreciates the irony of your current situation. He does not. He sent my brother to intercept me. Took me most of an afternoon to convince him and his men to stand down, so that I could follow Lyra and Mev north. I did hear that you battled your brother. I'd spoken to Kale about that very battle. Prince Terran was known as a ruthless defender of Gioria, and some said nearly as strong as his father. From talking to Kale, it seemed he was less bothered by the severed relationship with his father than being at odds with his brother. I did. He will never accept you again. I assumed Issa spoke of King Balthor. Did she refer to Kale's brother, Terran, as well? No, he will not. Somehow it took meeting Mev to appreciate how extreme my father's views had become. Before you say it, he stopped Issa. I know you tried to tell me, but he is my father. I knew something of complicated father-son relationships myself, and could sympathize with him even as I agreed with Issa. The Giorian king had never recovered from the loss of his queen to a human disease, and all knew his hatred for humans had grown throughout the years. Did I agree with the king's decision to kidnap Mev's mother and close the gate? Not many did. Outside of Gioria, of course. But I could understand well the need for revenge against those who hurt someone you loved. It was what drove me, and what would probably have been my downfall. Now, it seemed, the Maelstrom depths would have that honor. Interesting you mention the Aetherian Gate, I said, wanting Issa to give her attention to me. I'm sorry. I should have told her that night. After she slapped me, which I deserved. I should have followed her from the tavern and said those words. To this day, I couldn't explain why they'd stuck in my mouth. Why I remained silent. That's the reason we're here. What we're about to tell you cannot leave this chamber. Issa's brows raised. My integrity is not in question, Marek. Hearing my name from her, even in that tone, was something I didn't realize until now. I craved. No, I agreed. It is not. I want you to know, I said. The woman you saw me with is my friend Neris. Issa's hazel eyes flashed. Neris? The woman who just challenged Queen Lyriel, the new queen of Thalassaria. News travels fast, even among humans. Issa's chin tilted upwards. We have our ways, she said. I'd not meant it as a slight, but should have realized Issa would take it that way. She truly did hate me. Yes, that Neris. As you may have also heard, she partnered with a human by the name of Rowan of Estmere. My shared mission with him and Neris, along with Mev and Kale, is the reason we're here. We need your help. Issa's laugh wasn't at all like her. It was harsh and bitter. You are the very last person in Elydor I care to help, Marek. Then do it for us, Kale said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees as if prepared to pitch our plea. Though we still don't know how Mev was able to pass through the gate, she's been unable to return. Issa's eyes widened. You tried? She asked Mev, who nodded. Kale and I were not in a good place. I did try, and I am still desperate to get back to assure my mom and my friends that I'm okay. But as long as the portal, the gate, stays closed, I can't do that. How much do you know about how my father opened the gate, or how Kale's father closed it? Issa looked back and forth between them. As much as most others, which is not a lot. They say both men relied on the elders and their deep knowledge of Elydor's magic. I know your father had attempted to create a pathway to the human realm for hundreds of years before he was successful, and that it took King Balthor nearly 30 years to close it. I assume the fact that the two of them are the most powerful in their respective clans isn't a coincidence. No one who knew me would believe it, but that was what was most attracted me to Isolde. I heard her voice, appreciated her intellect, before I even saw her face. A brilliant strategist, Issa was as smart as she was beautiful. It is not, Mev verified. But neither of them, as strong as they are, could have done it without their clan's most powerful artifact. And not just their own, but all three. I watched as Issa took in that bit of information. Her eyes narrowed. I suppose that makes sense. To open such a gateway, having the artifacts from all clans would symbolize an acceptance of Elydor for such a thing to come into existence. I never thought of it precisely that way myself, but it did make sense. I could tell Mev and Kale were equally as impressed. Also, if Issa was going to look so extraordinarily beautiful when deep in thought, it was probably a better idea that I perish in the maelstrom depths than have her accompany me on this voyage. There is more to it, of course, Mev continued. But essentially, to reopen the gate and reunite my parents, along with all other humans who were separated when... She cleared her throat. Someone's father closed it. Kale's expression nearly made me laugh, but I didn't dare. Issa was fully invested in Mev's story and would not appreciate my levity. All three artifacts are needed. My father believes my ability to come through, even though the portal is closed, means it is entirely possible to reopen. Issa looked at me. It was as if I'd just successfully smuggled enchanted crystals past a contingency of Giorians. At least, until her neutral expression turned into a frown. That's why you are involved. Your friend, the Queen, has offered use of the tidal pearl, and now you seek the Stone of Morvalis? Impressive. Close. Neris has indeed pledged use of the tidal pearl when the time comes, and getting the Stone of Morvalis from King Balthor will become necessary as well. But that's his job. I nodded to Kale and reached for my wine. Taking a sip, I relished Issa's attention on me. In the meantime, we need to find the wind crystal. Apparently, when King Balthor stole it to close the gate, he returned a fake to Galfried and still has the original. Her eyes darted to Kale. His grimace confirmed my words. I returned it to King Galfried myself, he said, after a long, drawn-out negotiation, having no knowledge that it was not the real crystal. Mev's father knew immediately but never acknowledged it. King Galfried has been without the real wind crystal since... Issa's eyes widened. Yep, Mev said. Apparently he's performed enough extraordinary feats since, on his own accord, that no Aetherians suspected it was missing. He's been unable to locate it until now. It's another long story, how the wind crystal was discovered, but it has been, and Marek volunteered to go get it. Where is it? Deep within the maelstrom depths. Issa's jaw dropped as she turned her attention back to me. And you're planning to go get it? I am. Marek, you will be killed. I couldn't resist asking, would that displease you, Issa? She opened her mouth but closed it and glared at me. Clearly wanting to say, nay, something held her back. She hated me, despised what I had done to her. Obviously wished I was anywhere but in this solar chamber with her. But she didn't want me dead. That was at least something. The thought of not surviving this mission wasn't one I relished, but it was one of those things that just had to be done. Dying with Issa still angry at me? Not the way I wanted to go. And it seemed like I might just have an opportunity to turn those tides before our mission.
Chapter 4. Issa. I despised Marek of Thalassaria, Navarch of the Tidebreaker fleet. Charming opportunist. A smuggler who was as reckless as he was daring, as ruthless as he was charismatic. It should not surprise me that he'd volunteered to retrieve the wind crystal from a place none were known to have ventured to and survived. But neither did I want him to die. A certainty that none but me in this chamber seemed to appreciate. No one has made it out of the maelstrom depths alive, I said. That we know of, Marek quipped. You will allow him to do this? I asked Kale and Mev. None are more qualified to attempt it. Kale sat back in his seat, wine in hand. Mev appeared as worried as I felt, but she said nothing. For her, the stakes were higher than most, and it seemed she was willing to risk Marek's life to reopen the gate. And maybe I could not blame her for that. But neither could I so easily accept it. It is a death sentence. That smile. The same one that had so captivated me the day we met. He was unmistakably Thalassarian, the sun-bleached hair and tanned complexion only part of his clan's giveaway. From his clothing, a loose linen shirt and leather boots, more than one dagger ever present at his hip, that he hardly needed, courtesy of Marek's water-wielding abilities, to his carefree attitude, he embodied the free spirit most Elydorians associated with his kind. It was much more than just a smile. The combination of Marek's strong jawline, which emphasized an internal determination he kept closely guarded, and his easy manner, made it difficult not to be drawn in. Never again. Not wanting to see you dead does not mean I wish you well. I addressed Mev and Kale. I am sorry you've come all this way, and I sympathize with your plight. I, too, wish desperately that those who traveled to Elydor thinking it would be a temporary journey could get back to their families. I want you to be able to reunite with your family and friends, I said to Mev, and for your parents to do the same. But as you may have surmised, there is a history between us that makes it impossible for me to bear his presence. Ooh, that hurts, Issa. It's honesty, I shot back. Without going into the details of our situation, I tried to explain to Mev and Kale. Some wounds never heal. Instead, they change you, and not always for the better. Some might argue that even deep pain teaches us something, but the mark Marek left the first time we met is not one easily erased. It was a lesson I could have done without. No one spoke at first. If my words were dramatic, there was no help for it. Each and every one was true. Willingly going on a journey with Marek would be akin to opening the gates to an enemy force who intended to overtake you. Our intelligence places the wind crystal in those caves. Mev's eyes were pleading. But there is no way to be certain. Marek could be risking his life unnecessarily. If you were to accompany us, we could be certain. My shoulders dropped. The battle I prepared to fight fled my body instantly. Without revealing my thoughts, I listened, already knowing the outcome. When Terran attempted to stop me from taking Mev north, Adren was among the men. He defected and joined me, Cale said. But after learning what had to be done, he agreed to return home and attempt to locate the wind crystal. Cale's right-hand man was as loyal as any in Elydor, so Cale's story did not surprise me. He was welcomed back. Mostly. Some suspicion remained. All know of his loyalty to me, but pledging myself to King Galfred, partnering with his daughter, was the excuse he needed to publicly sever ties. This is an extraordinary turn of events, I admitted. You were right, Issa, to have criticized me over the years. I allowed my father's hatred of humans to influence my thinking. I never agreed my mother's death was the fault of your entire race, but I did unjustly believe humans were inferior to native Elydorians in many ways. For that, I owe you an apology. Princess Mevlida had influenced Cale's thinking more than I could have thought possible. You owe none to me, Cale, as well you know. He inclined his head. I offer it, nonetheless. By the way Mev grinned, I could tell she was proud of him, as she should be. Changing one's thinking after so many years of influence by your own parent was not an easy task. Thank you, I said simply, unable to stop myself from glancing at Marek. He was no longer smiling. If anyone in this chamber owed me an apology, it was him. But I doubted one would be forthcoming, nor would I accept it anyway. There were limits to my ability to forgive. If I refuse to help? I asked, knowing his answer already. Without warning, the memory of our first kiss popped into my mind. It had been summer, the garden at Hawthorne, once a source of my mother's pride, in full bloom. He'd taken me in his arms, and I went willingly, even knowing by then how many women he'd courted, or seduced, to be more accurate. That kiss had been everything I'd expected and more. How long had it been that I dreamed of Marek's kisses? You know the answer to that already, Issa. It has been precisely the same number of years since the day you met him. I pledged to my queen, Marek said, and to Mevlida, that I would attempt to retrieve the wind crystal. When I arrive in Gioria and meet with Adren, if he still believes it is hidden in the Maelstrom depths, that is where I will go. Our eyes held each other's as Cale and Mev fell away. It was just the two of us, and the crackle of the fire. There was no hope for it. I would speak with you alone. Gritting my teeth, I stood and made my way to the door. Opening it, I found Edric there, as expected. Will you see Prince Cale and Princess Mevlida to their chambers? If they need anything at all, I will see to it, my lady. Cale and Mev were already standing. Also, my lady, Lord Draven would like a word. Mev stopped before walking past me. Is he here? In this keep? I looked between her and Cale. Aye. He resides at Hawthorne Manor, I said, curious. Did you meet him on your last visit? I did. Briefly. Cale reached up, placing his hand on Mevlida's arm, as if stopping her from saying more. Thank you, Issa, for your hospitality. We do not wish to impose on you for more than one eve. You would leave on the morrow? Aye, he confirmed. I had little time to decide. We will speak again in the morn. Cale's eyes darted to Marek, I nodded, but said to Edric, "I will need more wine, please." At that, Marek laughed. It was a deep sound, one of pure merriment and joy, the sound of a man with few cares, as if he was prepared to be lost in the maelstrom depths because of a life well lived. A sound I'd heard in my dreams, willing it away as the sun rose. Closing the door, I spun toward him. "You will notice I am not laughing, Marek." Neither was he now, but the bold Navarch's smile still lingered. "I noticed that, and much more, Isa." He dared his tone to be suggestive, and didn't my traitorous body respond? Willing it to heal, I gave him my most stern and unforgiving expression. "As do I, Marek. If only I'd done so the first time we met." Sitting, I said nothing at first. When Edric returned a moment later, Marek seemed relieved. Unfortunately for him, my steward remained long enough to fill our pewter goblets, replace the now empty wine flagon, and give me a final look of pity before leaving. "I'm sorry, Isa." And there it was. Finally, after so many years. I had naught to say to his empty words. They meant nothing to me. Less than nothing. I took a long sip, wishing for a hot bath, but then cursing the memory of Marek telling me what he would do to me the first time we found ourselves in a tub together. One of many promises he never kept. "I would prefer if we discuss the matter at hand." "I'm sorry for—" "Stop," I said, unable to bear it. "I have little desire to hear your apologies now, Marek. The reason you left, without a word, the reason you never contacted me or returned to Hawthorne Manor later, the reason you said nothing to me at the Moonlit Current. None of it matters. Not anymore." "Of course it does." "No," I argued. "It does not. You are here because of Mevlida and Kale, and for your queen, not me. So I would prefer not to pretend otherwise, or this will never work." He didn't reply. The intensity of his stare, the absence of an ever-present smile, often bordering on a smirk, almost had me shifting in my seat. Instead, I took a sip of my wine, held firm, and tried to forget his many more years of experience. Dealing with immortals was immensely draining at times. This was one of those times. "I am Lady Isolde Hawthorne, daughter of two nobles who traced their roots to the origins of humans in Elydor, and before that to kings in the human realm. I cannot control Marek's thoughts or actions, but I can control my own, and I will not back down. He will never have my heart again." "I'll say nothing more on it than this," Marek said finally. "I was a coward to leave as I did. If I could have trusted myself to say goodbye and not stay, I'd have done so. Should have done so. I should have said that in the Moonlit Current, but was taken aback by your presence. By the time I'd gathered my wits about me, you were gone. And by your reaction, I thought staying away was for the best." I could hear the thud of my heart in both ears. How long had I craved for such an explanation? How many questions did I construct in my mind, wishing I could ask? There was a time, not long after he left, I'd have given everything to hear those words. But that time was long past. If I could have trusted myself to say goodbye and not stay. A weaker version of myself would ask what Marek meant by those words. "Were you injured?" I followed his gaze to the hem of my tunic. If it were anyone but Marek, I'd have apologized for receiving him in such a state. Traxon blood, I said instead. Sir Warren's still spending his days attempting to persuade you to remain inside the castle walls? I would not be lulled into conversation. I refused to be charmed a second time. I said simply. How do you envision me helping your mission? Marek sighed, apparently resigning himself to my refusal to engage in anything but discussion of the wind crystal's retrieval. He placed the wine goblet on the wooden table my father had hand-carved himself, an embodiment of one of the many reasons I could not leave Estmere, even if adventures like the ones Marek promised called to me. I plan to drop Mev and Kale in Etheria before sailing to the Giorian coast. Why? Mev will continue to learn Etherian ways and train with her father. Kale has been working with King Galfred and his elders to unearth vital knowledge about his own father and the Stone of Morvalis. Once the wind crystal is returned, such knowledge will become vital as he takes it back from Balthor. And the rest of your crew? A crew requires provisions, accommodations, and time, all luxuries I cannot afford. No. Absolutely no. You travel from Etheria to the depths alone. Alone. Or with you. I will rendezvous with Adran first and then take you as close to the depths as possible without putting you in danger. Once you confirm the crystal's presence in the caves, I will enter them alone. And likely die before he reached it. But I kept that to myself. The maelstrom depths are unpredictable, he continued. Even on the outskirts. The air itself carries a charge, the water churning as if it was alive. If the wind crystal is inside, its magic will amplify the chaos. You should be able to sense it several leagues out. Perhaps more. You are overly confident in my abilities. His brows rose, Marek's skepticism apparent. You sensed the amulet I carried before I stepped into your hall. If I remember correctly, after I learned of your abilities, you told me you'd sensed it well beyond Hawthorne's gatehouse. He'd almost pulled a smile from me at the memory. The amulet that nearly had you detained for smuggling? Not smuggling, a strategic relocation. That relic would have been locked away in a vault, forgotten, if not for me. Besides, it served its purpose. I had no wish to revisit the day we met. I would imagine, I said, concentrating instead on the task at hand. I could sense the wind crystal from quite a distance away, notwithstanding the turbulence of the maelstrom, which will surely complicate matters. Marek rubbed his thumb across his lower lip, something he did when deep in thought. I remembered the movement well. Suddenly, the wine in my goblet became the most interesting thing in the chamber. I stared at it, cursing myself for allowing, again, the thought of kissing him to enter into my mind.